Sometimes you're the problem. In the last video, we talked about being too available to people and kind of what that looked like in terms of a dynamic, but I feel like I didn't really emphasize on how much you actually play a part in the dynamic. And today I thought we can kind of more focus on ourselves as the problem instead of it being external factors. So, what does it actually mean to be the problem? Well, it's kind of subjective based on whatever situation you're referring to. But obviously in a friendship dynamic, you hold the friendship just as much as the other person does. So if one person isn't pulling their weight, or you're the person not pulling your weight, it will fall apart. It doesn't matter if the other person has done this or you've done that. If one person, just refuses to give it any effort in any sense, then that's how it's going to die. And that's not really the focus of today's video. But I feel like that's a good entry point to what I'm about to get into. So in terms of being the problem, this is basically something that affects us in every corner of our personal lives. Whether it's poor sleep habits, poor food habits, what you do with your day, how you look at the world, how you decide to act on things. Like any problem that you can think of that you can cause to yourself is caused by you 99% of the time. Now, of course, there's always going to be external factors, but a lot of situations come around where we could easily change the circumstances or just react to the situation different and be a little bit more level-headed with it, yet we don't do it. And I'm not going to sit here and belittle anybody who's made mistakes, who's done this, who's done that, as have I. We all have. But I guess I kind of want to more focus on the importance of realizing when you are actually at fault and why it's important to have that accountability. A lot of people like to talk on quotes like, you should control your response, not the action, and stuff like that. And I think that's a great way to look at it. But I also understand how hard it is as well to be able to just control yourself in a situation when something's clearly getting to you. It can take a lot of work and a lot of effort to do it. But it's being able to, stay grounded in those moments that can really help you push past that and become better. So when it comes to situations with other people, sometimes it's hard to take accountability on a situation in the moment because you don't truly know who's at fault. And obviously there are times where it's blatant, but there are other times where you can have a disagreement based on opposing opinions, or you can feel a type of way about something or not have full context or look at something narrow-minded. Same thing the other way as well. So sometimes you only get that closure and realization after really giving it some time to rest and looking at it objectively from the third person, looking at the entire picture, which is hard to do in the moment for a lot of us. And I kind of say this because I realized that in the previous video when talking about being too available for people, there are also times where you have to understand you are also not filling out your own schedule and you are also not putting yourself first too. Yes, other people are important and friendships and bonds are very, very essential to daily living. It's important to have those people around you that can uplift you and, help you to be better. But also at the same time, if you can't even present yourself to them in your own peak form, in the sense of being there for yourself, prioritizing you over them first, how can you expect the dynamic to change if you're prone to putting other people before you? If you can't learn to put yourself before others, how can you expect people who already put themselves before you to kind of do the same? It's like, you're trying to mix two opposing forces that don't work in unison. Two people who respect each other first, being friends, is going to be a better dynamic. Same thing in the sense of two people who don't put themselves first, putting each other first. Although you can say it's worse and more toxic, it works better than one who's on one side and one who isn't. Because it's a weird mixture. And it's very easy for one side to feel isolated and feel betrayed and felt left behind, when in theory the other person has no idea. Another thing too, going into what I was saying before, I really do want to put an emphasis on communication. Communication at all points is very, very, very important. Now, there are people who you cannot communicate with because they just refuse to listen or just don't have the ability to grasp the conversation. And that's not a diss to people who don't want to look at it any deeper than surface value. But there are people that you can't argue with. People say it takes one fact to shut up a smart person, and it takes 50 smart people to still not shut up one argumentative person, or whatever the quote is. It's basically saying you can't argue with someone who's willing to argue with a wall. So sometimes it's better to just, gracefully exit when need be. But also, a lot of things can be solved by just having a conversation. And I feel like I didn't emphasize on that enough in the last video, so I do want to emphasize it on it here. If you feel like you're not at fault, or you feel like there's a situation where something's happened and it's a bit of a gray area, talking it out with somebody can often get you the answer. There are times where I've made mistakes and my friends have made mistakes, and we talked about it and we realized we were both at fault. I was at fault for this part, he was at fault for that part, and then we learned to, put it aside and move forward. Instead of, just playing the blame game, we actually looked at the situation and said, you know what, this is fair or this isn't fair, or XYZ, and we actually just did that. That was so much more beneficial than just feeling a type of way and then complaining about it and saying people don't care, when there were those situations where really it was just my ignorance of wanting to have a conversation. And sometimes you have to be the one to initiate that. It doesn't mean people don't want to have those convos. It doesn't mean that people are against the idea of putting you before them, or making an effort to talk to you. Sometimes people just don't think about it that deep or don't have the time. But if people are able to have that conversation, most of the time you get the answer you're looking for out of it too. And sometimes they don't even realize you feel that way. So they don't even know that they need to have the conversation like that with you, because you haven't made an effort or even told them, like, hey, a lot of people talk about, communication is key. They never ever fucking communicate. That's the problem. Like, everyone says it's so important, but no one does it. And don't get me wrong, it is difficult to communicate at times. It's not easy to have those hard conversations, especially when they're really awkward ones and you don't really know what to say, or the reaction is kind of all over the place. But at the same time, they're necessary. They are basically forcing said issue to be discussed on. Whether or not you're satisfied with the outcome or they are, it still gets you somewhere else than where you would have been sitting there getting angry about it for no reason. And obviously, there's always going to be a time where external factors might actually be the problem. But it's important to understand that you internally are also part of it. Your side deserves a say as much as the other side. And if you feel that something is not serving you its purpose, or you feel like, you're not receiving an equal amount, or an amount that you feel is necessary, talk about it with someone. If you can't have a conversation, you've tried everything, that's when you can start, leaving things in the past or moving on. But being able to exhaust the options, not in an unhealthy way, but in a way where you know fully that this is dead and there's nothing I can do about it, that is the level of clarity you'd want in those situations. You don't want to just leave on a whim. So when I tell people, sometimes it might be a good idea to pull back a little bit just to kind of see who's matching your energy, it's not in the sense of cutting everyone off and being some solo lone wolf. It's about understanding what needs watering and what doesn't. When you grow in a garden, you can't always pamper the certain plants. You got to leave them in the sun for a little while. You got to give them some water and leave them be. They got to grow on their own. And if something dies, something dies. Even if you take care of it. If a plant's got what's that shit called? Blight? Is that the shit that kills plants? I don't know. When it's got something on it and it refuses to fix itself and it dies off, you can't do anything about that. Even if you try to nurture it and fix it, sometimes things need to grow on their own. Same thing with people. If you've tried everything, sometimes you got to know when to pull the plug. Same thing. Sometimes you also got to know when to not pull the plug. Sometimes people will just give up because it's too hard or they're not bothered. So it takes time to understand when a situation is worth exploring and where it isn't. And sometimes it's just lacking perspective. Sometimes you just might not understand how they look at things, and they might not understand how you look at things. And this is important too in our own life perspectives too. It's very easy to talk about other people more than it is to talk about ourselves, because we are going to be our biggest critic. We are always going to be our biggest problem or benefit. What we do for ourselves is the most important thing in our lives. If you want to make an effort to be better, you have to make that effort. If you don't want to make an effort and you just want to let yourself rot away, that's also up to you as well. There isn't no right or wrong answer in the sense of whatever you do is your choice. You can believe what you think is right or wrong. You can believe what you think is going to happen. At the end of the day, something will happen regardless of whatever you do, and it is up to you to decide if you're satisfied with that or not. Some people are, some people aren't. So when I say sometimes you're the problem, I don't say in the sense that you are the one to blame for everything, more that sometimes it really is just you and your fault. Sometimes it's just you who needs to make the decision, not somebody else, not this factor, not that, just you. And how you want to choose to take that information obviously is up to you. But it's just reminding ourselves that sometimes we need to look internally and, do a little bit of introspection, do a little bit of self-reflecting, and, understand, I guess, why things are happening, why it's happened like this, and what can we do to change it. If you're unhappy with the way you've acted before or the way something's going, have a conversation. And if you can't have a conversation, try something else. Don't just give up on a whim. But I mean, hey, that's all I got to say for this video. Thank you all so much for the continued support. I much appreciate it. Always love reading you guys' comments. As always, all the best. See you soon.